Good morning. I'm the Reverend Julianne Lepp. It is a great pleasure to be with you this morning, and welcome to our Sunday service at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Our opening words this morning are "Ever in Our Midst" by Karen Johnson. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your sense that we may know another world is on the way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way, at first no way, lend us your persistence, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves that the common stones in our hands might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. This Sunday we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before us, yet ever in our midst. Come, let us worship together.
All of the disinformation, don't let it fool your son. Got to keep on fighting till the battle is won, till it's won. They cannot take away your life, even though they are writing the laws. It's up to you and me to see that they don't, They try to say I'm lucky just to have my rights, but nobody is lucky just to have their rights, 'cause their rights. We are entitled to freedom. It's not a privilege at all. It's up to you and me to see that they know, people know. You have the right to live your life in the sun. You have the right to fight the evil ones. Don't let them take away your freedom, son. 'Cause it took so much blood before our rights were won.
Good morning. My name is Virginia Wolf, and I want to tell you why I will pledge as much as I can during the February pledge drive, which starts in 2 weeks on February 14th and runs through March 1st. Pledges made during this pledge drive apply to the fiscal year beginning July 2021 and continue through June 2022. Your pledge can be divided into monthly payments or in whatever way works best for you and your family. Payments can be made by check or online. Recurring payments can be set up online. Now let me tell you why I support this community. Carol and I and our 2 children arrived in Eau Claire in 1977, and quickly thereafter began attending the forerunner of this congregation, the UU Fellowship of Eau Claire. We were so glad it was here. It was the one place where we knew we would find like-minded people who might accept a lesbian couple and their family. We were not wrong. Our children have since become adults, left home, and formed their own families, and this church has become a second home for Carol and me. We have been taken in, respected, and loved. In 1990, we were illegally married right here in this church, and you packed the pews. Then over the years, you supported and encouraged us in our struggle to get legally married. We have served this church in many and various ways. Both of us have been presidents of the congregation. We have grown spiritually as the church matured from a small discussion group to a full-service religious community. My experience here inspired me to become a UU minister. In 1999, your minister. Until 2008, when I retired, my connection to this community deepened. And since then, as I have participated in church services, a chalice circle, elderlies, our book group, circle suppers, and many, many harvest auction items, my connection has grown even deeper. I still write sermons with you in mind. The UUC in Eau Claire is definitely a home where my heart is. And so I support it with both my service and my pocketbook. And I urge you to do likewise.
Good morning. My name is David Hirsch. I'm the congregation president this year. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation. We are a religious community who commit ourselves to diversity. We hope to nourish human differences, those of gender, race, age, ability, sexual orientation, political views, culture, class, and religious belief. Welcome to all who treasure freedom of conscience in the search for truth. We promise to do our best to provide you a spiritual home. We extend a special welcome to our visitors today. We hope you follow our Facebook page. To participate in Zoom and receive announcements about special events and our religious exploration classes, please sign up for our weekly email. There should be a link in the comment section on our Facebook page where you can sign up. Also, families can follow our UUC Religious Exploration Facebook page. There are religious exploration classes for 4K through 9th grade and youth group every Wednesday online for middle school and high school. We are so glad you joined us today.
Good morning. I'm David Jones. Please join with me, and I invite you to light your chalice at home as we read the words for lighting the chalice. When we say save the rainforest, we don't mean that we cease to honor the mighty cedars or the reaching pines. We mean that one particular piece of a deeply sacred whole is more at risk than others, and that this risk, this threat is worthy of our very bravest actions. So it is with Black lives in this country, and the message that Black lives matter is important, so long as this nation effectively functions as if they do not. Nancy McDonald Lepp.
Our anti-racism discussion group discussed this book last month, and it's When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir. And it's a heavy book, but I found a reading that really lifts up what this movement has meant. In the meetings we have in the village, our focus is how to get the message across of building power and ensuring healing that we want to bring. In my home, mostly women talk about what we deserve. We say we deserve another knowing, the knowing that comes when you assume that your life will be long, will be vibrant, will be healthy. We deserve to imagine a world without prisons and punishment, a world where they are not needed, a world rooted in mutuality. We deserve at least to aim for that. We agree that it is something that happens inside of a person, a people, a community, when you think you will not live, that people around you will not live. We talk about how you develop an attitude, one that dismisses hope, discards dreams. We say that so many others take for granted. Decent food beyond the 7-Elevens and Taco Bells that populate the neighborhoods that brought me forth. We deserve healthy, organic, and whole food that nourishes the body and the brain, that allows for a full course of energy, rest, and sleep at the end of a well-lived and balanced day. Love and dreaming. We deserve to know that life without the threat of heart attacks at 50, or strokes or diabetes. Food we have access to and can afford is a loaded gun. And shelter, we deserve that too. Not the shelter that is lined with asbestos walls, or walls that are too thin to keep out the cold. Not the shelter with pipes that pour lead-based water onto our skin, down our throats in Flint and North Dakota and New York and in Mississippi, in places that never make the news. We deserve this kind of shelter our hard work demands, homes that are safe and non-toxic and well-lit and warm, and a shelter that is not a cage, whether that cage is a prison or a free world equivalent, a shelter where our gifts are watered, where they have a space to grow, a greenhouse for all that we pull from our dreaming, and we are allowed to plant. We deserve to be our gardeners and deserve to have gardeners, mentors and teachers who bring the sunlight and rain and whispered voices above the seedling that say, grow, baby, grow. We deserve love, thick, full-bodied, and healthy love. And this is from the memoir written by the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, Patrice Khan Cullors and Asha Bandali. Thank you. Now is the time when we move into our joys and concerns, part of our service. I invite you to share in the chat a joy or concern that might be on your hearts that you would like supported in this community. And I will read those aloud for those to be shared. I would like to light a candle of thanks for our amazing musicians and David Jones and all those that share their gifts with us on these Sunday mornings. Patty shares a joy that her 98-year-old grandmother got her first COVID vaccine this week. Yay! We want more of that. We light this candle. Ashley shares that she has a concern for family, friends, home. And Shell shares that she has 40 years down, 5 days to go, a joyous retirement. Angela has a concern that it is the 1-year anniversary of her son's death this week. We hold you in our hearts, Angela. Tracy says, my friend Christina has COVID for the 2nd time this year, so we light a candle of concern. Bob Jankowski shares caring thoughts for Alan Jackson, Carol Johnson, and for Jack Schoen, who continues in his healing. Danny shares that she is deeply missing the farm and looking forward to going again soon. Marcia has a concern about the mask mandate for the state, and hopefully that our community, Eau Claire, will keep one. Allison has a concern for a former student whose father passed away this week. Dawn has a concern for a friend who lost her husband to COVID, and for my aunt who had surgery on Friday. Light this candle for all the joys and concerns too tender to escape the folds of our hearts. You'll please join me in the words that we close joys and concerns. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love, hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
So, as a white person and as someone who has spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to be an ally, how to recognize my own privilege. It seems like an onion that I keep peeling back to try and understand that, we live our lived experience, and, oftentimes people say, well, it was easy for me. Well, your experience is not everyone else's experience. And I think the world of anti-racism and understanding the lens in which you operate helps us become better people. It helps us understand the world in which we move in, and that not everyone has the same levels of privilege. And in the Black Lives Matter movement, it was formed in 2013. 3 radical Black organizers, Alicia Garza, Patricia Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created a Black-centered movement building project called Black Lives Matter. And it was in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer, George Zimmerman. Black Lives Matter is an affirmation of Black folks' humanity, contributions to society, and their resilience in the face of deadly oppression. As Black Lives Matter developed through 2013 and 2014, it was a huge platform and organizing tool online. Other groups and organizations used it to amplify anti-Black racism across the country. And in all the ways that it showed up, Tamir Rice, Tanisha Anderson, Maya Hall, Walter Scott, Sandra Bland, these are names inherently important. The space that Black Lives Matter held and continues to hold helped propel the conversation around state-sanctioned violence that they experienced. We particularly saw that Black Lives Matter highlighted Black women, and specifically trans Black women, who were losing their lives at alarming rates. In 2014, Mike Brown was murdered by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. And the response in the community was big. The Black Lives Matter people came together and saw that the courageous community in Ferguson and St. Louis was being tear gassed and pepper sprayed as they tried to exercise their right to grieve, and it was a big movement that came from that. And it continued to go. And as we have moved into seeing the violence that happened this summer, and the violence that continues to happen as Black lives are lost because of being treated differently, and driving while Black, buying while Black, and the fact that their bodies are not considered as much as if I committed a crime. And I think that's important to understand. I know I see on my Facebook feed, comparisons of the Capitol riots to Black Lives Matter riots, and which is not, which is a way that people tried to portray Black Lives Matter protests often to make it into something that people should shun. And I think it's hard. It's hard to know how to be an ally, how to show up. And the best thing to do that I'm trying to do is to read more, listen more, step back, make room in leadership, and to know that I'm going to make mistakes. I say embarrassing things sometimes, and I go, oh, why did I say that? And I try and apologize. But I also try and process my own stuff in ways that don't ask people of color to do it for me. And, doing anti-racism work is deep soul work. I hope that you and others and myself will keep finding ways to examine our lives, to examine the lives of those around us, and see how we can have compassion and support people of color, and to support our own growth as part of that beloved community that we're trying to work towards. I hope that that we'll continue to grow as a nation and to keep moving forward so that it is safer for people of any background, race, religion, sexual orientation to walk down a street, and that people can feel safer and more loved. May it be so. Thank you.
Thanks, Reverend Julie, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming by today virtually. I really appreciate it. I've got a homily of about 20 minutes today, which is titled Black Lives Matter in Love and in Struggle. And it's kind of a shout out to Alice Walker that folks may know from The Color Purple, a foremother really of the Black Lives Matter movement. And she had a short story collection called In Love and in Trouble. So today's homily is In Love and in Struggle. And it's meant to emphasize the centrality of love and struggle to Black Lives Matter, which is a decentralized global movement that I'm still learning about myself. But there's still some origins that I think we can talk about to help understand and explain the deep roots and the relevance of Black Lives Matter to our lives today. The first of these two origin stories takes place in cities that are important to me personally. I would call them sites of love and struggle in my own life: Omaha, Nebraska, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then the second origin story is set in Sanford, Florida, one of the birthplaces of the Black Lives Matter movement. Origin story 1, Black Lives Matter in Love and Community. Alicia Garza helped form Black Lives Matter, and she has written that forming BLM was meant as a love letter to Black people. You can look at a lot of statements to define Black Lives Matter, but so far for me, this one line, a love letter to Black people, is a reminder that beyond the headlines and beyond more than 500 marches for change last summer, Black Lives Matter is conceived out of love for Black communities, a love that is powerful and transforming to experience personally. Where can this love be found? I've experienced this love in predominantly Black spaces within our communities, whether these are physical spaces, interpersonal spaces, or imagined spaces. And even when these spaces are not racially exclusive, their atmosphere promotes respect and reverence for Black cultural traditions. I'm going to talk about one of those spaces that was available to many community members in my hometown, Omaha, Nebraska, the near north side of Omaha, Nebraska. And this location was the Ohio Street Fish Market, 16th and Ohio Street, near downtown. This enterprise was made possible by a collaboration between white business owners and a largely Black clientele. And this is in the days when business loans were hard to get for a Black startup. The fish market dates back to the 1950s. Wilbur Kelly was the fish man who rented a space in the basement of an apartment building, a multi-story, multi-unit building. And in that basement, he installed some large tanks for live fish, had a chute. You could unload the live fish straight from the truck to the basement tanks, built a kitchen with a jukebox and a soda machine. And it was very near the headquarters of Union Pacific Railroad. So workers could stop by for lunch from that large enterprise. And Mr. Kelly would also drive to the racially segregated North Side neighborhoods, including the housing projects that were predominantly Black. And he would sell fresh and prepared fish to Black and Jewish families on the North Side of Omaha. And in these days, if you didn't know how to fish, if you knew your way around a rod and reel, you could go to the Missouri River and catch some carp yourself and sell it to the fish market, 5 cents a pound for carp. And this enterprise was still going on when I was a young adult in the 1980s. Back then, for a while, I had a government job paying $4.73 an hour. And with that kind of money, you could go to the fish market, carp fillet on a slice of white bread, hot sauce, and a pickle, $1. Or you could go with perch instead of carp. It was $2.25. And if you had it, it was worth that extra dollar and change. You'd see your meal cooked over a grease fryer by a rather large counterman by the name of Tiny. but from research, I believe that his given name was Mitch Simon. So I've done a lot of traveling, and I've never forgotten the taste and feel of love on your plate at the Ohio Street Fish Market. Black Lives Matter, and that includes the working relationships and enterprises we build across color lines that sustain and nurture Black communities. Another personal space of connection and love was in South Minneapolis, near the intersection of 38th and Chicago. And this is where the murder of George Floyd took place last year. I lived near this corner for several years with a group of young musicians. It was a big house that we felt very fortunate to find as a rental property, hardwood floors, fireplace, and a basement that was big enough for house parties and recording projects. I can't say that our neighbors were always keen on house parties till 3 a.m., but there was an atmosphere of mutual respect for us as music makers and for us as neighbors. And there were incidents. It was sometimes a challenging neighborhood to live in from that standpoint, like a bottle being thrown into a gathering we had in the yard, and burglary incidents and theft incidents. But there was also a deeper peace that comes from living among neighbors from all walks of life. You would feel a wave of tension if there was a notorious crime incident, and you'd feel a wave of delight when there was a new restaurant, a new venue, new shops, and also the pride of having for a while a Black mayor, Sharon Sales Belton, a Black megastar like Prince, a brilliant Black playwright, August Wilson. These were all reminders that aspirations and effort can pay off. You got to keep grinding. That's the message of those high achievements, because a change is going to come. So for me, Black Lives Matter taps into this love I felt within and for predominantly Black communities, even when those communities are imagined or interpersonal. When I was a boy, I could read a book about someone like Hank Aaron and all his achievements and his journey. And just reading that book would be uplifting in a way that still is sustaining today. And coming from a place where my older siblings attended the same high schools as Gail Sayers and Bob Gibson and Amon Green, and I get a lift from that, just the way that we overcame so many barriers in this predominantly Black near north side of Omaha. But some of that overcoming was also across racial lines, and that's important. That goes back to what Reverend Julie said. Origin story 2, Black Lives Matter in struggle and in tragedy. A few weeks ago, I learned that the housing project on 30th and Lake Street in Omaha, which is where my first home, it was at the boundary of an area that was redlined by the exclusive white city leadership in the 1920s. And this redlining held for decades into my own period of life. Agreements between white-owned banks, city government, insurance companies, and the Army base at Fort Omaha. By these means, Black families could not own or rent homes outside of the redlining district. That included the Ohio Street Fish Market as well as the home I grew up in. There was also vigilante violence that was contributing to this hostile atmosphere. September 1919, a Black man named Will Brown was accused of the old crime of menacing a white woman, and a mob of whites overran the county courthouse. First, they tried to hang the mayor, Ed Smith, who was a reform-minded mayor of Omaha. And he tried to keep the mob out of the courthouse, but that wasn't possible with the size of the mob. Will Brown was captured by the mob and hung from the streetlights on the corner of 18th and Harney. And this is near the public library that was still in operation during my childhood. His body would be burned publicly in a bonfire and dragged through downtown streets behind a stolen police car. And for almost 100 years, Will Brown would have an unmarked grave in the large cemetery in the north side, Forest Lawn Cemetery. until a California man, Chris Hebert, heard about this incident on a television special, actually on Henry Fonda, who's from Omaha. He heard about this incident and he marked Mr. Brown's grave with a headstone reading, "Lest we forget." Black Lives Matter. This redlining was in place fully from the mid-1920s into the 1970s and 80s. Going back to the 20s, this was 5 years after the vigilante murder of Will Brown. A child named Malcolm Little was born on the north side of Omaha. The boy's father, Earl Little, was a follower of Marcus Garvey. And this Jamaican activist was considered to be a radical figure among whites at the time. So the Little family in Omaha was attacked by members of the Ku Klux Klan. There were about 43,000 members in the state of Nebraska in those days. And the family moved to Lansing, Michigan after that. And Mr. Earl Little was killed officially by a streetcar accident. But there was a white vigilante organization called the Black Legion that was a splinter group from the Ku Klux Klan, suspected in as many as 50 murders in the Midwest during the Great Depression. After the death of his father, the boy Malcolm Little would become orphaned, fall into a life of crime, and serve time in prison until he converted to Islam and changed his name to Malcolm X. Black Lives Matter, in love and in struggle. This is a global, decentralized movement, and the stories, as well as the protests, matter too. The stories matter. The stories we tell about kindness, concern, collaboration across racial division, caring, and tragedy. So I see the challenge at this time for every person of conscience is to build the kind of dialogue that Reverend Julie talked about, building dialogue across a racial divide, that sometimes this is a wide divide and sometimes it's narrow enough to cross. We must use our common stories and our common humanity to nurture and sustain connections across these boundaries. Another news event from this week was the passing of Hank Aaron, and we may know that his journey to the major leagues began right here in Eau Claire. One of Hank Aaron's predecessors in Major League Baseball was Jackie Robinson, and his ball-playing career, like Aaron's, was conceived as struggle. And this is where Sanford, Florida comes in. In March 1946, Jackie Robinson started his spring training in Sanford, Florida, which is in between Orlando and Daytona Beach, if you've seen the map of Florida or been to those cities. Sanford is the county seat of Seminole County. And in this region in the 19th century, a coalition of people, indigenous people, Creeks, Muskogee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and formerly enslaved African Americans fought a long war against US governmental repression. It's really our longest war in national history, from 1816 to 1858. And some of the Seminoles did not surrender. They never surrendered. They retreated into the Everglades rather than surrender to the US control. On the other side of this war, there was Andrew Jackson, and his forces were fighting in Georgia, Alabama, and right around Sanford, Florida, where the Seminole were. It was Andrew Jackson that signed the Indian Removal Act, saying that the government of the United States, that at the time was about 40 years old, had the right to remove indigenous people from their ancestral lands. And after the signing of this law, 100,000 Native people were displaced. Some of them marched as far as 5,000 miles, a journey known as the Trail of Tears. Now, the reason for this history, mentioning it, is because this is part of the history of armed conflict to assert the white man's dominion over laws and land. And when we know this, it's not surprising that when Jackie Robinson and his new wife went to Sanford, Florida in 1946, those racial tensions and racial control were still high. Robinson's family was denied service at the Lakefront Hotel where the other ball players stayed. They did find accommodations locally, at the home of a local Black physician, but there were threats everywhere they went. Florida, during these years, had the distinction of more lynchings per capita than any other state in the country. And after the second day of practice in Sanford, the Robinsons were advised to leave town. 76 years later, February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American resident of Miami, was visiting Sanford with his father. And many of us do know the story of Trayvon Martin's homicide, shot to death by a neighborhood watch captain. He was unarmed, not involved in criminal activity when he was killed. And it is that murder of Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, the same city of the Seminoles, the same city where Jackie Robinson sought to integrate Major League Baseball. This same city is the location that catalyzed this movement called Black Lives Matter. And I think there's multiple aspects of the death of Trayvon Martin that push tolerance of racism to its breaking point. Just the knowledge that every Black adult or youth can be considered a criminal suspect without cause. And even when that suspicion results in murder to an individual that is not engaged in criminal activity, the state still tends to allow deadly crimes like this to go unpunished. And then adding the tensions around entrenched patterns of racism and land ownership, job opportunities, the right to vote. And maybe most pertinently to my remarks today, the absence of Black voices from public histories that give meaning to our social lives. Our stories matter, Black stories matter. With the killings of Trayvon Martin in 2012 and so many others, Black Lives Matter has arisen as a soul force in love and in struggle. Some concluding comments. Black Lives Matter is now discussed frequently in our public conversations, but there's not enough attention to the substance of the movement, its origins, its goals, and its impact after the Black Lives Matter hashtag was circulated 8 years ago. So I hope it helps a little bit to share my own impressions of the movement as kind of a child of the civil rights era. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the predominantly Black communities I have known. And that includes that community near the north side of Omaha. And the tone of that community, the experience of that community is not something that my children will be able to experience. So it's really important that the stories are there. The Ohio Street Fish Market closed for good in 1990 under very sad circumstances. The last manager of that enterprise, Mitchell Simon, was found dead in his apartment above the restaurant, stabbed numerous times. It's a cold case, no suspect ever arrested. And it was the third homicide that occurred to workers at that enterprise. A gentleman 2 years earlier, Johnny Joe Shields, disappeared from his home and was never seen again. And in the fairly early days of the enterprise, in 1960, Wilbur Kelly, the founder of the enterprise, his wife and business partner, Betty Kelly, was shot and killed while protecting their daughter from an altercation outside the restaurant. So these are sobering endings for a very uplifting story. And the building still is also demolished at this point. But what does stand to give hope is these memories that I stand with the brave entrepreneurs that gave their lives to bring delicious flavor to our urban neighborhood. So I think making those spaces real and imagined and interpersonal is still very much what I hope is an outcome of the Black Lives Matter movement. Certainly, Black Lives Matter has increased the visibility of atrocities against Black people and their allies who work side by side to create beloved communities. I hope that we can pool our resources to bring healing in the wake of these tragedies. And this includes in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd, so that future generations can live in thriving, diverse neighborhoods. We do know that asserting full personhood as Black people might be accompanied by acts of white supremacy, because the uplift and decolonizing of the Black self has always been a moral and practical threat to white supremacy. So it is sobering to have this feeling that today's racial reckoning is likely to remain uncomfortable, unpredictable, and dangerous until a broad and committed consensus is formed to grapple with deep racial contradictions at the heart of the American experiment. We need each other as allies, as families, and as friends to sustain our beloved communities. With these words, I stand with Black Lives Matter in love and in struggle. No hope without action, no peace without justice. I have 3 final affirmations in light of the rise of Black Lives Matter. Affirmation 1, in these uncertain times, please be encouraged to grieve without modesty. No one has standing to tell me as a Black man, or all of us as a beloved community, who we should grieve for or how we should grieve. Affirmation 2, in this time of change and uncertainty, it is well and proper that Black communities and their allies reclaim the gains we have attained through love and struggle. Achievements, large and small, past and present, must be celebrated and cherished. Affirmation 3, the time has come for me as a Black man and we as a Black community to be exactly who we are, publicly and without apology. The world we are becoming requires this of us. Black Lives Matter, in love and in struggle. Blessed be.
Namaste to Dr. David Jones. With gratitude for the abundance in our lives, we help to give people in need and to support the work of this congregation. The 50/50 Share the Plate recipient for January is the Bolton Refuge House. You can donate online at uueauclair.com or text to give at 84321. And today we are blessed with the music of Dr. David Jones for our Music for Giving. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Folks, welcome to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. I'm here at Lake Wissota, about to play a tune called Chippewa Love. And I wanted to play this tune in the spot where it was born, here in Lake Wissota, Wisconsin. And this is a place that I've come to with my young children. And it's a little beach here. You can go swimming in the lake when it's not frozen. And I wrote this tune to talk about the life of northern Wisconsin, and even from the perspective of a person of color living in northern Wisconsin, which isn't always easy. It's a little bit of a complicated life if that's your identity and this is your place. But I have certainly found a home here, and the people and the landscape have such elements of beauty to them that it inspires me to write and to live and to have some growth in this place. So I wanted to just come here to express through this guitar that was given to me by my mother through an inheritance. It's an Alvarez 12-string. I wanted to express my love for this place and my hope for a future that embraces the world that we're becoming, but also remembers where we were when the world was a smaller place. And I like to get back to those smaller places to do my own growth. And that's really what has led to this tune, Chippewa Love. Sun to moon, night today. Chilling in a joint where the Jonestones used to play. Drinking my drink, minding my own. Ain't nothing happening but the rent up here in this hole. What up, dude? Where you been? Ain't seen your broadcast since I don't know when. Now you got game, you think you do. All I gotta say is, man, it's good to see you. Chippewa. Chippewa. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Eric VP, he moved away. I dig our new sound, but sometimes I miss his bass. Yes, I do. But we making that noise, still raising that roof. And homeboy's breath, don't you know, it's 30 proof. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Ojibwe clan, still standing strong. All things return to the source, and it won't be long till every block is sacred ground. From Irvine Park to the falls downtown. Honey-do list, I got it all done. Now I'm on Lake Wissota in the setting sun. So set me up, my line's going down. Might ride the blue bus all the way to town. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love is here to stay. One more hour and I just might step that way. Central Land Bridge to 29. 12:30 at the snout and I'm feeling fine. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love. Chippewa love, right here from Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin.
Thanks for the comments, folks. I appreciate it. I won't try to add any comments just due to the Zoom management here, but I really appreciate it. We're going to read our words for extinguishing the chalice, so please feel free to join at home and read along. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. There's closing words coming up here from Michelle Obama. And just a couple of things before we read those closing words. If you're watching from the Facebook live stream, thanks for joining us. If you'd like to get information on how to join services in Zoom, please fill out the visitor link in the Facebook comments. Those attending in Zoom will take a brief moment, or for those attending in Zoom, we'll take a brief moment to share joys and concerns or share names that you may not have shared during the service. And then we will move into our breakout rooms. So a couple of things coming up. Let's close with these words by Michelle Obama. Like so many of you, I'm pained by these recent tragedies, and I'm exhausted by a heartbreak that never seems to stop. Right now, it's George, Brianna, and Ahmad. Before that, it was Eric, Sandra, and Michael. It just goes on and on and on. Race and racism is a reality that so many of us grew up learning how to just deal with. But if we ever hope to move past it, it can't just be on people of color to deal with it. It's up to all of us, Black, white, everyone, no matter how well-meaning we think we might be, to do the honest, uncomfortable work of rooting it out. It starts with self-examination and listening to those whose lives are different from our own. It ends with justice, compassion, and empathy that manifests in our lives and on our streets. I pray we all have the strength for that journey, just as I pray for the souls and the families of those who were taken from us. Go in peace. Thank you, everyone.